Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast presented by Briar Greaves Insurance. Protecting your assets starts with a company that you can count on. So whether it's auto, homeowners, flood, boaters, or business insurance, Briar Greaves Insurance are the best people to work with. For more information, visit briargreavesinsurance.com or give them a call at 813-876-4166. That is 813-876-4166. It is a Thursday edition of the Pewter Report podcast, our last of the week to the general public. Of course, we will have one tomorrow on the Pewter Insider for Pewter Platinum and Premier members, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on the show. The big topic of discussion, what we will talk about today, is when will Bucs wide receiver Chris Godwin return into the fold? We didn't see him during OTAs, mandatory mini camp, even though he's been rehabbing. We saw him at practice briefly with his, Chris Godwin Jr., as Bud Cannabis says. Chris Godwin Jr., we saw him with teammates, but not running or anything like that. Will he be ready for the start of the regular season? Who's going to have to pick up the slack in the meantime? We're going to break that all down on today's show. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is Adam Slavon of PewterReport.com. Hello, Adam. How we doing?
Matt, we're doing great, and it's been a while since it's been you and I on the Pewter Report podcast, so really excited to be back on with you today, talking about Chris Godwin, who, by all accounts, is the biggest variable to keep the Bucs offense successful going into the season, because you look at it, and the offense was so strong to begin last year. Godwin Jr. was on track to have a career year, and unfortunately, he had the dislocated ankle injury, and now you're kind of looking at it. He suffered it last October. Will he be ready this time around, whether that's training camp in late July, if he can start to get things going? Will it be week one, or will it be a couple weeks in?
Right, and this is a situation that Chris Godwin Jr. has been in before, coming off of that torn ACL following the 2021 season. And as we saw, it took a little bit for him to get going. But I think it's important that we don't rush it this time around. Maybe not necessarily that the Bucs were rushing it, but I think what's important, Adam, is that the Bucs are in a very, very, very different situation with their wide receiver room, with their offense this time around compared to what went on in 2022. And again, it's a little bit of a different injury. And it's funny because yesterday, watching some Bucs highlights, I'm doing some news and notes and all of these things, and I almost forgot with how good the Bucs offense was last year that Chris Godwin Jr. got injured like very early on in the season. And we're not going to sit here and say that they're better without Chris Godwin. I mean, hell, they just gave him a whole chunk of money to say otherwise. But I feel like this offense is in a good spot with or without Chris Godwin Jr., even though obviously they're better off with him in the lineup.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And you go back to 2022, when he returned from that torn ACL, he averaged under 10 yards per catch. And that was the receiver room where it was really him, Mike Evans, and Russell Gage, really. I mean, it was very top heavy. And now you look at it, and the Bucs are as four deep as any wide receiver room in the NFL. So they can weather the storm a little bit should Godwin not be ready in week one. But going back to that 2021 in December when he suffered the torn ACL, he ramped up and he was ready to go by September the following year. So in 9 months, he recovered from a torn ACL and MCL. And you look at the dislocated ankle kind of recovery timeline, a little bit of WebMDing, if you will, but the timetable is between 6 to 12 weeks. If it's really severe, it could go up to about 16 weeks or 4 months. So he suffered that injury in October. So when you kind of look at it, he should be ready to go by week one. And a Bucs player, Bryce Hall, he had a dislocated ankle in week one. And in April, he was running full speed. Todd Bowles said at the time that he was ready to go. So you look at it, you look at Chris Godwin, you're like, hey, he could be ready come training camp.
Yeah, that's very true. I love the WebMD edition right there. You're a resident medical expert on on PewterReport.com. But yeah, that's a really good point, bringing up Bryce Hall as well, because Hall was over at mandatory minicamp, getting in some reps, playing in the defense. And, he was part of the team last year, but he got injured in that first game. But, it's important to get everybody as healthy as possible when it comes to their addition to the team this upcoming season. It's just so interesting how much better Chris Godwin can make this overall team. I mean, you look at his stats last year: 7 games, 62 targets, 50 catches, 576 yards. That was a second lowest in his career, with his lowest being when he was a rookie in 2017, when he had 525 yards. But again, he did that in 7 games. I mean, the best version of Chris Godwin was 2019, when he had 86 catches for 1,333 yards. That was a career high there, along with a career high of 9 touchdowns. I mean, he was going to blow that out of the water if he was not even have career best, which we saw Baker Mayfield have career best. We saw, Mike Evans continue to be the GOAT at the position. But Chris Godwin, for the beginning of that year, when they were winning games and scoring tons of points, I know they continued to score tons of points, but they found it out in different ways with like Bucky Irving and relying on the offensive line. Chris Godwin, for many of this, Adam, was the locomotive of this team. So I guess what I wonder now is, with Josh Grizzard becoming the offensive coordinator, now he was here last year, was the third down guy, drew up a lot of plays there. Can they still survive and still function as a great offense if Chris Godwin Jr. isn't there for the beginning? Or is it going to take time? Is it going to have to slow down a little bit for it to then pick back up?
I think that's a great question. I did want to put into context a little bit. You mentioned like Chris Godwin's receiving yard total. At the time of injury, those 50 catches for 570 something yards and his touchdowns were like top 3 marks in the league. I think only really behind CeeDee Lamb and one other wide receiver. He was playing some of the best ball. And he got a 3-year, $66 million contract. Should he have played the full season last year, Matt? You're looking at a much bigger deal for Chris Godwin. I think the Bucs were probably going to offer him $30 million in free agency, but the Bucs, they got him back on a bargain. And you look at things now, and I think that Chris Godwin can still contribute immediately. Maybe not to the role that he did last year. I mean, he doesn't need to, right? You have Mike. The running game is solidified. I don't think the running game's really going to take a step back, because you still have Bucky Irving, you still have Rachaad White. The entire offensive line's back. The young guys are only getting better up front. So when it comes down to it, Chris Godwin just really needs to be the number 2. He doesn't need to be the locomotive. You would welcome it if he just started finding the end zone here and there. But you can't forget Jalen McMillan had 7 touchdowns in the last 5 games. Emeka Egbuka, he's just being praised by everybody in the organization for what he's done so far in the offseason, how pro-ready he already looks. McMillan said earlier in the offseason he already knows half the playbook. So with that being said, Godwin doesn't need to be the big locomotive. He just needs to be one of the cars on the offensive train, and they're going to keep chugging along.
Shout out to Owen Wilson for being Lightning McQueen in Cars.
Ka-chow.
I was I've actually never seen that movie, but I was watching an Owen Wilson interview recently, and he said people like come up to him all the time and say that. So you had that on mind.
Best Pixar movie.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Everyone in the comments, put your best Pixar movie. We'll see. We'll see how it's going. By the way, Monica says, I miss Chris Godwin, and also says, how's my Baker doing? Well, we miss Chris Godwin as well. I always enjoy watching him play. I love the leadership by example that he provides to the wide receiver room, which Mike Evans was, as Joel Oregon says, Toy
That's
Story.
A good one too.
As Mike Evans was kind of filling that role this time around. But Baker Mayfield's doing fine. Had one bad 3-interception game, but he's going to be good to go and rock and rolling in training camp. Another thing that I think got overlooked, because it was just like, hey, rejoice, Chris Godwin is back. Everybody's so happy, as Jody McKenzie says, How to Train Your Dragon. So is there a difference between Pixar and DreamWorks? Is that the same animation?
I think so.
Okay.
Right? I think that's like, just a studio under the umbrella.
Right. Yeah, I think DreamWorks is like Shrek and stuff like that. Because I love Aladdin. I don't know if that's I think that's Pixar. I don't know. But yeah, everyone, please continue. We're not going to read every single one out loud, as Payne Gustin says, Incredible 1 and 2. But yeah, put in your favorite animation movies or Pixar and DreamWorks movies. We'll get to a couple of those comments. But yeah, to get back on track to Chris Godwin, who's probably watching a lot of Pixar movies and stuff now that he is a father. But one thing that I think gets overlooked was that he was going to get $100 million to go to the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
And was like, home is where the heart is, and my home is in Tampa Bay. I think we kind of forget that Chris Godwin is very much a creature of habit to a degree, someone that knows how to thrive in a proper environment, but may not be the best in a different type of environment. You see it all the time. Free agents leave and they go somewhere else, and it's not exactly a fit. I think one of the best examples, and this might be a little bit before your time, but Scott's always referencing people that I've never heard of. But Albert Hainsworth, I'm sure you've heard his name.
Oh yeah.
Albert Hainsworth, was incredible on the Titans. He stomped on a guy's face. That was a big controversy, but then he had a 6th season and everybody kind of forgot it. He took the absolute bag, and he actually ended up being a Buccaneer late in his career, but he took the bag and went to the Washington, at the time, Redskins, now Washington Commanders, and was atrocious. He was horrible. He got fat and lazy and rested on the fact that he had a lot of guaranteed money. I'm not saying Chris Godwin would have done that with the Patriots, but you look at a guy that is in a really comfortable spot with chemistry with Baker Mayfield, not necessarily having to be the top guy with Mike Evans there, but can be the top guy if necessary, if called upon. And then now you add in Jalen McMillan into the mix going into year 2, and Emeka Egbuka, who we'll spend a lot of time talking about on today's show as well. It's a little bit like wide receiver by committee, even though you have 2 studs and then 2 like proteges almost as well, for like whenever Mike decides to retire, whenever Chris decides that he doesn't want to play anymore, and it'll at least be for 3 more seasons because he's under contract for that. But I think Chris Godwin kind of took a lay of the land and said, all right, I'm going to get life-changing money regardless. That's another thing too. Everyone wants to be the highest paid guy. You can still live a great life with $66 million, not to mention all the money that he had already earned in his career. So the sense of environment, I think, was just as important for Chris Godwin more than anything else.
Definitely. And I would like to see kind of the tax breakdown of going to New England versus Tampa, because, the income tax, I think that weighs in a little bit. Whether if you're making $22 million in Tampa compared to 30 in New England, you're probably breaking even, or pretty close too. But regardless, I think with Godwin, it was his legacy. It was staying in Tampa Bay, being that next Buccaneer for life. I mean, we talk about Mike Evans, Levante David, and then it's Chris Godwin and Vita Vea as being the next guys that will likely finish their career as Bucs. And I think that was important for him. Obviously, he has his foundation here, his wife, now being a father. I mean, just staying in the area with Baker, Mike, like he knows the guys. He already has a legacy here as the 2nd best wide receiver in team history. I mean, all that's pretty good for being a 3rd-round pick back in 2017. He's made a great career for himself here. And there is one other point I kind of want to mention when talking about like the receiving core, and that is last year, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, when they were out, the Bucs lost 3 straight games after the Ravens. And Jalen McMillan, he was out for the last 2 against the 49ers and the Chiefs. At this year, you would expect the wide receiver room to be healthier, Matt. And with that, I think you can see maybe a 1 to 2 game swing where the Bucs, they won 10 games last year. Having a full, healthy wide receiver room, as talented as it is, I think you could see the Bucs winning those close games. I mean, they lost to the 49ers by 3 points, came really close against the Chiefs, made it to overtime. I think they arguably could win those games.
Excuse me. I think it makes you look deeper into that wide receiver room because, yes, part of drafting Emeka Egbuka is that you avoid those situations where all 3 wide receivers could get hurt. It almost reminds me of that 2022 season as well, because there was a game, it was actually Bucs Packers, so you probably remember it very well, where Mike Evans had just gotten suspended because he got in, brawl number 10,000 with Marshawn Lattimore, and Godwin had re-injured himself because he came back a little bit too early. So the Bucs were down their top 2 wide receivers, and Russell Gage was essentially playing on one leg, and the
And
Bucs
then they
lost that
signed
game.
like Cole Beasley, I think, off the street at the
At
time.
one point, first of all, the run of Cole Beasley with the Bucs was absolutely insane. He signed with the team. He had one practice where he tried to return a punt. He muffed the punt, grabbed it, spun. His helmet went flying off
Yeah,
of his head,
I remember that.
and then played 1 or 2 games and decided to retire, and then signed with the Bills at the end of the season.
Yeah.
It was such a weird couple of months, and he was in the media every other day spewing about whatever and topics we're not going to get into on today's show. But yeah, what a ride with Cole Beasley on this team for a little bit. That was quite the era as well, when it was like, hey, Tom Brady's the quarterback. All right, I'm going to go over there. There was Julio Jones. There was Richard Sherman, of course, Le'Veon Bell the year before. A lot of odd cast and characters during that time with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But you're not going to see that situation this time around with the Bucs, because even if you get I know we want to see the Bucs do a lot of 4 wide receivers and things of that nature, but you're not going to run that 25 times a game.
Right.
If you're going to get around, it varies from game to game, but if you're going to get around 45 to 65 snaps on offense, you're not going to put 65% of those snaps as 4 wide receivers. So unless they're going balls to the wall in practice, like they kind of did last year, which is so funny because Luke Gedeke, we were at his press conference after minicamp where he's like, I can only go full speed. It bothers me when guys aren't going full speed. And I was thinking, because I was writing about him today, and I was thinking how I totally understand that, and I vibe with that too, because I think if you're not doing it in game speed, then are you really getting the value out of the rep? But at the same time, if you went full throttle every single time, every single practice, well, then you run into what happened with the Bucs last year, where guys were getting injured on Friday. It was supposed to be a walkthrough and everything like that. But that's a long way of me saying that if you look past the top 3, you still got Ibuka there, or maybe McMillan's your 4th wide receiver. You still feel pretty good, again, in a emergency situation. Okay, Sterling Shepard might have to level up a little bit, and he did last year when it was needed. Rakim Jarrett, Trey Palmer. If there's one game where it's all right, Trey Palmer has to be wide receiver 3, you don't hate it the way that I think in other years with the depth at wide receiver for the Bucs, you'd be like, there's no chance that this group does anything. I don't feel that way with receivers 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on this team.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the 4 wide receiver sets, Matt, and I think this year you could kind of see that be what last year's pony package was for the offense, where maybe 10, 15 snaps a game, you are going no huddle, 4 wide receivers, and you're just throwing the ball, dinking and dunking down the field. I think that has a lot of value. And Josh Grizzard, I mean, he has so many toys at his disposal. And you mentioned the 2 running backs too, on top of the wide receivers and what they do for the passing game. I mean, Rachaad White, probably one of the best receiving backs in the NFL. Bucky Irving isn't too far behind. He kind of gets overshadowed there. But you mentioned the depth at wide receiver, and it goes almost 10 deep. You mentioned the top 4, assuming Tez Johnson makes the team. Sterling Shepard. Cameron Johnson, if he's healthy, maybe he slots in as a return guy. Trey Palmer, Rakim Jarrett, and the team's also high on Garrett Green. So you could see so many of those wide receivers. If they're not making the team, they're making the practice squad. And you wouldn't mind maybe having Sterling Shepard or Trey Palmer on the practice squad to start the year. I think that's an embarrassment of riches. And it speaks to how much better the wide receiver room has gotten. The floor of it has gotten so much higher, because if Emeka Ibuka is the 4th wide receiver, he's best 4th wide receiver in the National Football League. The same could be said for Jalen McMillan. I mean, it's stupid how much better the wide receiver room got. And going into the offseason, it wasn't seen as a big need, but now that they drafted the players that they did, they've gotten so much better. And they really, if Mike Evans were to get hurt, Chris Godwin, if he isn't ready week 1, you still got all the bases covered.
Stupid is the right word, because when you think about it, how many wide receivers drafted in the first round, whether it was this most recent draft or even in the last 10 years, How many wide receivers get drafted in the first round and then are fourth string to begin the season? It
I
hardly
can't think of
ever
any.
happens.
Yeah.
It hardly ever happens. Like, you could look at Tet McMillan and Travis Hunter or whatever, if he's going to be a corner, wide receiver, whatever. Travis Hunter, Tet McMillan, Matthew Golden
Matthew
to the
Golden.
Packers.
Yeah.
Golden, I think, is in a little bit of a different situation because the Packers, and you probably know a little bit better, the Packers are like, they have all good wide receivers. It's a little bit of
No
like
great
wide
ones.
receiver by committee, but there's not like the standout top guy the way that like the Bucs have or other examples like that. But Tet McMillan and Travis Hunter, they're not coming in to be wide receiver 4. So it's such a unique spot for Emeka Egbuka, who, if it is a 4 wide receiver matchup, or if it is him as the third wide receiver I think there'll be certain packages where Emeka Egbuka is the third wide receiver and then Jalen McMillan's the third wide receiver, depending on the type of play. Because as we've learned, and as Emeka Egbuka has told us as well, he's a physical dude. He likes blocking. He's very much that physical wide receiver, the way that Chris Godwin is as well. So whether it's McMillan or Emeka Egbuka, they're going to have some crazy, crazy matchups just based on the opponent and based on what Josh Grizzard can do for them.
Yeah, and I think another point to kind of dive deeper is like, let's say Godwin isn't ready till weeks 2 or 3, and you look at like the profiles of Abuka and McMillan. I mean, last year at Ohio State, Abuka played 548 snaps in the slot, kind of filling that role that like Godwin would play in the Bucs offense. And he's already been compared so much to Godwin. You kind of see that his play style, how he was used with the Buckeyes. Jalen McMillan, he had 168 snaps in the slot. And then Sterling Shepard, he had 269 snaps. So each of those guys can kind of fill the role that Godwin had last year. Like, should he not be ready? And if he is ready, Matt, like as you mentioned, like you have Abuka and McMillan, you're
Yeah,
just trying to get them the ball. You're just trying to find ways
right.
to get them the ball to really like justify their talent. Because if one of those receivers gets like 3 or 4 receptions, you're like, how can I get him more receptions?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm curious how Abuka is going to line up necessarily because we know Mike is going to be the outside wide receiver. McMillan seems like he's more of the other outside wide receiver, but who's going to be that F receiver, the guy that's in the slot? And Godwin can move around, and this is, of course, is when they're in their base offense, which is 11 personnel or 3 wide receivers and 1 tight end. Is Abuka going to primarily line up, in the slot? Is he going to go a little bit outside, a little bit inside? The way that Godwin has, there's so many different layers and levels that Josh Grizzard can come up with. And I don't have necessarily all the answers right now. I'm more intrigued than anything else.
Yeah, yeah.
Nothing else?
Um, no,
All
I
right.
think you
Great,
covered it.
great insight. Let's get to a commercial. Let's talk about our friends over at Immuni Financial. Let's see. If you're a longtime podcast listener, you probably remember the late great Mark Cook talking about Briar Greaves Insurance. Pewter Report Scott Reynolds has been a Briar Greaves customer for years, and there simply is not a better insurance company in the Tampa Bay area. So visit briargreavesinsurance.com to see for yourself. Briar Greaves Insurance is family owned, and their main goal is helping people. They want to help people find the right insurance policy for you and your family. Whether it's home or auto, boating insurance, or business insurance, turn to Briar Greaves and find out why their personal touch and customer service sets them apart. The days of waiting on hold to speak with an insurance representative that you don't even know are over. With Briar Greaves Insurance, you'll have a relationship with your agent who can answer your questions and advise you on the best policies. As 2 recent hurricanes have shown, and unfortunately we're going to be in hurricane season again sometime soon, hurricane season has shown all of us that live in the Tampa Bay area that there is a cost to living in paradise. Briar Greaves can help make sure you have the right hurricane and flood insurance to make sure you and your home are protected. Visit briargreavesinsurance.com today. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R, Greaves, G-R-I-E-V-E-S, or call their office today at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166, and tell them that Pewter Report sent you. It was cool seeing the Briar Greaves people out at the Pewter Platinum member event recently. We had Zion McCollum on hand. We had Mike Greenberg on hand as well. That was a lot of fun. And so now would be a good time to give a shout out to all of our Pewter Platinum members. So thank you to Scott Federico, Rachel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, Hezo813, Ash Fishpool, Joel Elrican, Sam, John Dale Morris, Zach Brannigan, RP89, Eric McMillan, Connor Four Reels, Kevin Thomas, Mario Thomas, Zach Jarvis, Leighton Carter, the guy is gifted, and our favorite name, and Brandon Riley. Thank you so much, everybody, for your support. We appreciate all of you for being Pewter Platinum members. We will have a show tomorrow. We're going to be talking about, can the Bucs get the number 1 seed in the NFC? Who's going to be the biggest threat to them? Do they have what it takes to get the job done? That'll be tomorrow's show for Pewter Platinum and Premier members at 1:30. But Adam, before the show, we were having a conversation about where the Bucs rank with their entire wide receiver room. They were ranked number 2 according to Trevor Sikkema. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree, disagree, or where would you put them?
Yeah, before I answer that, I do want to shout out all the Pewter Platinum members. I was going to talk about it last week, kind of when we just had the get together, but it was great. Like talking to Scott Federico, Leighton Carter, like meeting some of the best Bucs fans out there. And that's what the Pewter people are, all of you guys watching. So just want to thank you. And when you look at the best wide receiver rooms in the NFL, I understood Trevor Sikkema's reasoning because he put the Eagles number 1 and AJ Brown, probably one of the best wide receivers in football outside of Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Probably a little bit better than Mike Evans at this point. And then you have Devontae Smith. They have a better tight end in Dallas Goedert than really the Bucs tight ends are. But that's not a slight on Cade Otton. And then Saquon Barkley, he had the second highest receiving grade of any running back last year. So I think the Eagles have more top-end talent, but where the Bucs really shine is they have the best depth. And we already mentioned the wide receiver room that goes 4 deep and beyond, and then 2 of the best receiving backs in football. So I think it's a coin flip when you look at the Eagles and the Bucs, who really has the best wide receiver room in general, talking about all the weapons. But the Bucs, man, just all the talent there. I mean, Baker Mayfield could throw for 5,000 yards this year.
I'm curious if Baker is going to throw for 1,000 just based on how good the running game can be. That's the only thing that I think would stop him from going and reaching 5,000 passing yards. Because I think even though Baker had career highs last year, he can surpass that once again. I have no doubts that Baker Mayfield can do that job. Now, it's an interesting conversation overall about, is it better to be top heavy or is it better to be lean enough throughout the entire unit? Because if you're talking about the Super Bowl and it's one game and you want your best guys, well then, yeah, I do think there is an argument that the Eagles certainly are the cream of the crop. I think you probably slide the Bengals in there as well with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. But I still think if we're just talking about best duos, best combinations, I don't know if Mike and Chris are necessarily the best, but because they've been doing it for so long, so there's so much groundwork and everything like that. I would say they're probably the top 5, though. I mean, Justin Jefferson makes it so top heavy with the Vikings, but is Jordan Addison, is he a better number 2? No, absolutely not. So it's tough to look at all the other teams. There's 32 teams. That's Trevor's job. He's got to look at all 32 teams and see all the ins and outs of the depth. I think the Bucs may have the deepest overall. So if they're not necessarily the best, well, I don't know. Let's have Emeka Ibuka go up against 4 stringers on other teams. Let's have Jalen McMillan go against 3rd stringers on other teams. There's only so many teams that have 3 deep. Everybody wants to have a number 1. But even a team like the Commanders, who they just got Deebo Samuel, that's a good 1-2 punch with Deebo and Terry McLaurin. But what about after that? Olamide Zaccheaus, is he still around there? I'm taking I'm taking Jalen McMillan or Emeka Buka over him. So I don't know. It's a good conversation. It's an interesting way to dive deeper into the depth of like every single team. But if the Bucs aren't number one, it's probably more of a top heavy thing than necessarily, who's the leanest and who's got the most depth going back to, as we talked about, not just 1 through 3. It's about 4 through essentially 10 with this group.
Yeah, and with Trevor's argument, one point that he made that I kind of disagreed with the Pro Football Focus position rankings because they didn't put Chris Godwin in the top 32. And I felt that was a little bit disrespectful. I mean, yeah, he played only 7 games, but in those 7 games, he was really good. And you have to like put him, even if he's at the back half of that. And you kind of talk about the top wide receiver duos in football. Mike and Chris are in the top 5. I mean, just based on track record alone. And the production has spoken for itself for so many years now that even if A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, you have Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, like Mike and Chris are right in that conversation. Maybe they're not number 1, maybe they're 3 or 4, but you look at it, you have those two. And we mentioned at the top of the show, you have 2 guys waiting in the wings who are going to be wide receiver 1 and 2, like going into the 2030s potentially, and McMillan and Ibuka. So if you're that deep, you have Rashad White, you have Bucky Irving, you have Cade Otton, maybe Payne Durham, Devin Culper in there as well. I mean, Baker Mayfield, I said this last year, that he had the best supporting cast of weapons around him in his career. And now you give him even more help. I mean, it makes his life easier. It makes Josh Grizzard's life easier because he could go out in the pony package. He could go out 4 wide receiver sets, 11 personnel. They don't even need to rely on 12 personnel, really. I mean, they could really do anything schematically that they want. And it kind of reminds you, Matt, of when the Bucs were on that Super Bowl run and they went 5 wide and had Rob Gronkowski and Antonio Brown. This set of weapons isn't far off from that.
That's a really good point. It's funny. I was actually looking up Gronk stats before for an article that's going to be on pewterreport.com relatively soon. And Gronk's 2020 season was pretty good. He had over 600 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns in a full 16-game season. They played 16 games at the time. But Gronk was even better the following year in 2021 when you fully, I know they didn't win the Super Bowl and that's the ultimate goal, but you fully had like every weapon at your disposal with just the chemistry and the camaraderie before Antonio Brown ruined all of that. But Gronk in his second year with the Bucs, he only played 12 games and yet had over 800 yards receiving and only 1 less touchdown. So yeah, I would love to see a situation where Josh Grizzard gets bored at offensive coordinator. Like, you don't want him to be playing with his food a little bit too much. Like, hey, let's see what kind of crazy system we can come up with here. Because I feel like you would see that with the Lions a little bit with Ben Johnson, who's now moved on to the Chicago Bears. But, like, did Penei Sewell actually have to go out for a pass or, swing on a lateral and get the ball? No, but it was fun and it was exciting and all of those things. So I would love to get to a situation where the Bucs are just scoring points at will. Then, hey, let's get a gadget play for Tez Johnson. Maybe you put Tez Johnson and Cameron Johnson in the backfield. Like, just something so different and so unique. You're not going to see it all of the time, but see it from time to time, I think would be pretty cool. And you mentioned the Rams wide receivers. Adrian Frazier said Chris Godwin is better than any receiver that Los Angeles has got. Now, of course, they moved on from Cooper Kupp, but they do have Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, who has not played with the Rams before. He has played with pretty good QBs in his career, tried to revive that with Aaron Rodgers, but he's going to be working with Matthew Stafford this upcoming season. I think that's a good argument / conversation. Mike and Chris or Puka Nacua, the youngest out of everybody that we mentioned, and Devontae Adams. I wonder how long it's going to take for Devontae Adams to click in LA, because I don't necessarily think it's going to be overnight, especially with that style of offense that the Rams run. And the Bucs do play the Rams this season.
They do. And it is a good conversation to have. When you look at Devontae Adams, you kind of wonder when the wheels will fall off a little bit. He's been on 3 teams now in less than 2 seasons. I mean, reasons being what they will, not wanting to play at the Raiders anymore without his buddy Derek Carr, going to New York, playing with Aaron Rodgers, and now out in LA. I mean, I think think he's 32, 33. So he's kind of reaching that point where wide receivers fall off a cliff. And Mike, he's shown that he's savvy, and like just his play style alone, you kind of expect him to continue to play good until he retires, whether that's 2 or 3 years from now. And then Chris Godwin, if he gets back to last season, I think the Bucs undoubtedly have the better wide receiver duo. But we'll see. I think it's week 11 or week 12 this year.
Yeah, it's later on. It's a primetime game. I'm forgetting if it's Sunday or Monday, but we could just go to our handy dandy schedule.
Oh yeah, week 12.
Right here. Yeah, that is a Sunday night game. So we'll get Mike Tirico, Chris Collinsworth sliding into that booth. He hasn't done it as much now that he's become self-aware about it. But yeah, that's one of the more intriguing games on the schedule as well. I want to get back to Josh Grizzard, though. I'm curious to get your opinion on this, Adam. Where do you think Josh Grizzard will have the biggest impact on this team? Because we've already seen in minicamp the Bucs are going a little bit more vertical with their passing plays, so that maybe means less completion percentage for Baker Mayfield. But a 17-yard play is going to be because the ball is thrown and caught at 17 yards. It's not necessarily yards after the catch, which is great, but you can't always be relied upon. Or will it be just an improvement of the running game based on what he's got in his big old Yale brain there, or coming from Miami where they had a unique running situation? What are your thoughts on the biggest impact that Josh Grizzard will have with Tampa Bay's offense during this 2025 season?
I think the biggest impact that he'll make on the offense comes in the passing game. I mean, his background as a wide receivers coach and working under Adam Gase, Mike McDaniel, he really understands the nuances of the pass game. And that goes back to his playing days at Yale, where I believe he was a cornerback. So he kind of understands what it takes to be a good wide receiver, because he saw wide receivers all the time in practice. And I think for the offense, for as good and efficient as it was last year, kind of the missed opportunities stemmed from not going vertical as much. And that led to Baker Mayfield having the highest completion percentage of his career. He was completing 71% of his passes, kind of like that Drew Brees level of efficiency. But I think it's worth taking more shots down the field. You have Mike Evans, 6'5" the last time I checked, and like the ability to just send him on go routes and say, hey, go get it. If they do that a little bit more, I think Dave Canales had a good idea of, you want to kind of set that big shot up. You want to take so many blows until you have that knockout punch. I really like that quote from him. And I think that's what the Bucs offense should do, because as we've mentioned all show, they have the personnel to do it. And even though like Trey Palmer is a 6 wide receiver, like maybe put him in a couple times, send him down the field, see what happens.
Yeah, I wish Trey Palmer would have been the deep ball threat that I think a lot of us wanted to be. I mean, you and I were at the joint training camp practice with the Jets a couple of seasons ago when Trey Palmer beat Sauce Gardner deep down the field.
He got lost in the sauce.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a deep ball, just go route. I think Trask may have thrown it and not Baker. But regardless, it was a beautiful play by Trey Palmer. And then I get it. Again, he's the 4th string wide receiver. He's not going to be on the field as much. And he's had some impact with the Bucs. He scored a couple of touchdowns. He had a big touchdown last year as well. But he hasn't really been big play Trey, other than that game against the Eagles where everybody was doing that. David Moore scored. I'm talking about the playoff game against the Eagles. David Moore had the big catch and run. Trey Palmer as well. On the flip side, and it needs to continue to happen, but Tez Johnson has been that guy in mandatory minicamp. He's been the guy going deep down the field, but he has a little bit more of an arsenal to his receiving game. He's not just a go route guy. And I was comparing Tez Johnson to this the other day. Bucs fans know, love, and adore Scotty Miller, who is now, I believe, with the Pittsburgh Steelers. At least he was with the Falcons for a little bit and then the Steelers. Scotty Miller didn't have an impact every single game, but he was a threat every single game because he could go down the field, stretch a defense, and every now and then he would go and make a big play, and it was a lot of fun. People would always confuse Scotty Miller for being a guy in the slot because he's a small wide receiver. No, he was an outside wide receiver. I think at Tez Johnson's floor, he is Scotty Miller, a guy that can go deep, get open, make some big plays. You might not see it all 17 games, but you'll see it for a quarter of it. Maybe you get it for 7 out of the 17 games or whatever the case may be. That's really all you could ask for someone whose floor is going to be Scotty Miller. But I think Tez Johnson is way more than that. This dude can break tackles. He may end up being the punt returner. He's good for team morale. He's best friends with Bucky Irving. He's funny, and he just gets it. I think Tez Johnson will be able to become what we wanted Trey Palmer to be. And that's not easy for a guy that's a 7th-round pick. It's tough to make the team as a 7th-rounder. But if anybody's going to do it, I think Tez Johnson is going to be the guy to get it done.
Matt, I'm really glad you brought up Tez Johnson because I was going to mention him. And he's somebody that, like, this point in the offseason, you get excited a little bit about everybody because there's not many negative headlines being generated. Like, you're not going to be like, oh, even if Baker, he threw 3 interceptions in one practice, you're not going to be like, oh, he sucks now. It's like the offseason's a point of optimism where every team starts fresh. So for a 7th-round pick like Tez Johnson, I think he's going to live up to that and then some because most mock drafts had him pegged as like a 3rd, 4th-round pick. Back at the Senior Bowl, Matt, it was him and Xavier Restrepo, and that were really shining in practices. Restrepo ran 4.83, but Tez Johnson, I think he ran like a 4.51, and you see that explosion. He watches Bucky highlights. He looks like Bucky Irving at wide receiver, the way that he makes guys miss because of his size. And I think that has a lot of value, even if it's not immediate. Maybe he's just a return guy. I think he can kind of be what the offense really wanted out of Devin Tompkins, kind of that gadget guy, because if he plays maybe 10, 20% of snaps, he can make the most of them. And all it takes is that one big play. We saw it in that Eagles playoff game, whereas David Moore, he made like 1 or 2 catches. One of them was that long touchdown. Trey Palmer, he flashed in that game. I think that's what Tez Johnson could do because he has a skill set.
I'm just a big fan of Tez Johnson. Like, we'll see what he does on the field, but like personality-wise, I'm just a big fan of him. Maybe he can go and get some commercials out of it or something like that too. Get a bigger payday and get some more money. And if you want to manage your money the right way, the best people to go and work with is Muni Financial.
At Muni Financial, we help you live in the now.
Dude, congratulations. We're so happy for you.
Thank you. And even though the now may feel very different, you still need to plan for the future.
How's retirement treating you?
Oh, just fantastic.
I know I say it all the time, but you really got to come up to Colorado.
Let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
We can help you develop that plan to keep you on track so you can still prepare for tomorrow, today. Muni Financial. Plan ahead, stay ahead.
That's all right. Muni Financial has proudly been serving clients across the country since 1980. They can help you with a number of different things, whether it's advisory services, investment banking, insurance services, annuities, or sales and trading. Nobody does it better than Muni Financial. If you want to set up a college account for your kid, if they want to go to school, you can do that as well. And the cool thing about Muni Financial is that they're not just in Tampa or Colorado, like the commercial says. They're all over the continental United States. You can go to Texas. You can go to Oregon. You can go somewhere in the Northeast, like, I don't know, Connecticut or whatever the case may be. So check out Muni Financial, give them a call, get a free consultation, and see how Muni Financial can help you. Let's get to a couple of comments and stuff like that from the people that have been watching this show. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you. First of all, Joel Elrican has now been a Pewter Report channel member for 10 months. So thank you, Joel, for all of your support. We really, really appreciate that. As he says, go Bucs with the pirate emoji as well. So thank you, Joel. Stephen Stansfield says, I have faith in Josh Grizzard run game more than the passing attack. Yeah, I just have this gut feeling that at least early on, we're going to see the biggest improvement. I don't want to say change. There could be things that change, but biggest improvement in the running game. And I don't know if it's going to be because just different looks, the rotation of how the running backs are being used, maybe a little bit more of Sean Tucker, or the fact that Bucky Irving is the starting running back since, week 1, where last year he kind of took over as it went on. But I just have a gut feeling it's going to be a little bit more about the running game early on than it is Baker Mayfield going crazy with Mike and Emeka Egbuka, and we'll see what happens with Chris Godwin. Jr.
Yeah, you never know, though, because last year against the Commanders, Baker Mayfield threw for 4 touchdowns. He had a really good game, got everybody involved. But you're right. I mean, early in the season, they can rely on that run game. They don't need to rely on the pass just because there's such good foundation there. I mean, the offensive line, we talked about the wide receiver room being one of the best, Matt. The offensive line's one of the best in the NFL.
Yes.
And if Graham Barton takes another step forward, Cody Mauch, maybe Luke Gedeke, I mean, there's so many studs up there that they could just really run how they want to. And I think last year you saw the run game kind of get into midseason form as Bucky Irving really took the reins. But taking over the reins week 1, you have Bucky and then Rachaad White kind of filling in as needed. I do think you're going to see more Sean Tucker, but regardless of who's in the backfield, they're going to have success. And you saw that jump in efficiency. I mean, for example, Rachaad White, he went from having 3.6 yards in 2023 to 4.3 in 2024. I think he will even take another step forward this year. I think all the guys are going to be efficient running the football, getting 5 yards a pop, and that opens so much and does so much for the offense that when Baker Mayfield decides to drop back and he has all the guys around him, he's going to dink and dunk his way down the field.
Yeah, I think Baker's going to have a lot of touchdown passes this year that aren't extremely far. I think there are going to be a lot of red zone touchdowns, a lot of goal line touchdowns. That's fine. They all count the same. 41 is 41. What he did last year. Nobody goes back and says, oh, well, 3 were from the 4-yard line or whatever the case may be. And when you have a great offensive line, you can do everything. So that's a huge advantage for the Bucs. And I also agree. I think we're going to see a little bit more of Sean Tucker this year. How and when, I don't necessarily know. But, based on the potential he has, what he did in that New Orleans game, I think Josh Grizzard's going to find a way to get him the ball a little bit more. I got a comment from Tony Tega who says, hey, Matt, quick question. How much better would Chris Godwin Jr. be if Justin Herbert was his quarterback? Love the show, guys. This is in reference to a little rant I had about Justin Herbert being overrated. And again, it's not Justin Herbert. It's all of the media overhyping Justin Herbert for his great talent and, his rocket arm, even though he's done nothing in the NFL. Chris Godwin Jr. would make Justin Herbert the next Joe Montana. That's how good Chris Godwin is. And Justin Herbert would be he'd be at the feet of Chris Godwin, bowing, saying, thank you, Chris Godwin, for helping me reach my potential. So now all of the media can finally be like, see, we told you about Justin Herbert. But that's not going to happen because Justin Herbert's in LA. They're a run-heavy team. And Justin Herbert will continue to be a good, solid quarterback that you can build around and then choke horrendously in the postseason.
Historically choke. And I do want to say, the Herbert conversation is getting stale because, if we had this conversation maybe 2021 or 2022, okay, he was coming off a good season. He threw 38 touchdowns. Maybe he will be the next big thing. But we're in 2025, and he had a horrible playoff game, the worst playoff performance by a quarterback. And I'm sick of the conversation that Justin Herbert's better than Baker Mayfield. I think that's stupid. Based on recent production, Baker Mayfield is a better quarterback.
Yeah. And that's why it's crazy that Justin Herbert had so much better MVP odds than Baker Mayfield. But you could check out our Baker Mayfield MVP podcast from earlier this week. Shaggy, who has also been a Pewter Report YouTube channel member for 10 months. Thank you, Shaggy. Says, what's good, Pewter people? How you doing, Shaggy? Corey Fleming just got done looking at rookie running back Josh Williams from LSU. This guy went undrafted? Really? Yeah, Adam. There's been a lot of hype from the Bucs front office and the coaches about Josh Williams. He's a dude that it's going to be tough to break in, after Sean Tucker and Rachaad White. But if given an opportunity, he might be one of the most explosive guys that we see, at least during the preseason.
And I was looking at his profile, looking over the beast, and looking over Josh Williams and seeing his statistics kind of remind me of Chase Edmonds a little bit, to where each year in college, Williams didn't get much more than 100 carries per year. But when he was on the field, he was the perfect change of pace back. I think he's about 5'10", 190. He's smaller in size, but the profile and excitement building around him.
Yeah.
What was it? Tez Johnson said that he was his roommate and he wouldn't turn the TV off, or he had to sleep with it on at night.
Something like that.
He was the guy that was mentioned. But I think he'll be a fun running back and probably better than DJ Williams on the practice squad.
Another thing that's a lot of fun is going on over to Walk-On. So many awesome deals that they have in food and drinks as well. You can go tonight and check out what might be the last game of the NBA Finals between the Thunder and the Pacers. The Thunder are up 3-2, trying to close it out in Indiana, where we were at for the Combine. We don't know if Tyrese Halliburton is going to play. But you can go and watch all the sports there. There's still baseball going on, a couple of soccer tournaments going on at the moment. Tuesday's their big day. It's happy hour all day and $5 Tito's. But if you go tonight, on Thursday, they have happy hour right now from 3 to 6, but then also from 9 p.m. till close. So you can watch this podcast at the bar right now or at a table, and then do the same at 9 until close. So check out all the great deals they have, delicious food and drinks. That's where we had our Pewter Platinum member event the other day last week, and it was a ton of fun, and I can't wait to go back to Walk-Ons again. There are 3 in the Tampa Bay area location. There's one over in Lakeland, another in Wesley Chapel, and a third in Midtown Tampa, not far from Raymond James Stadium. So shout out to Walk-Ons. Check one out soon. Eat like a winner, drink like a champ over at Walk-Ons. Before we wrap up the show, we'll get to a couple of final comments. Adrian Frazier said, the whole offense depends on Tristan Wirfs. Really? I mean, you don't want Tristan Wirfs to be out for a long time, but we saw last year Tristan missed a game. We saw Luke Gedeke miss several games. There was the Aiden Hutchinson game, but the Bucs won that game as well. He's your best offensive lineman. There's no doubt about it. But I wouldn't say the season is completely lost if Tristan Wirfs is injured for a little bit of time.
Now, the season wouldn't be lost, but last year they had Justin School. This year it goes to Charlie Heck. Can he fill the place of Tristan Wirfs for a game or two? Yeah. But if Tristan Wirfs misses half the season, he's the anchor of the offensive line, the captain, the guy that really... The offensive line room is really close, but I think Tristan's most important part of that, obviously. Yeah. He's so friendly, nice, and welcoming. Like, he took Luke Gedeke under his wing, and that really started the whole thing to where they became so tightly knit. If you lose a guy like that for an extended amount of time, I think it will show on the field. But like Baker, he drives the offense, and Tristan Wirfs, like, he's in the passenger seat.
Yeah, he certainly is. It'd be funny watching like Baker driving the motorcycle and then Tristan's in the sidecar because he's so big. Like, there's no way that he could fit. But yeah, it's very much they work hand in hand. There's no doubt about it. And that's why they're so close and they vacation together and things like that nature. Let's see. A lot of Tez Johnson discussion. Grizz says Tez is heads and shoulders better than Scotty Miller. I think he'll change Ibuka for that number 3 role. I don't know about that one, but I appreciate the optimism. TJ Woschowski says Tez is going to be the guy. Grizz says Tez looks better than some of these second and third wide receivers. This ain't a Jalen Darden type of guy. And we'll end it with this comment. Mr. One Buck for Life says, run 4 wide. I put our 4th wide against any 4th corner. I absolutely agree with that. There's going to be a ton of favorable matchups for the likes of Jalen McMillan and Emeka Ibuka, specifically in the offense this year.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect way to round out the show. And like just talking about the depth at wide receiver, the offensive line, running back. We mentioned it earlier, but I'd put Sean Tucker up against any third running back in the league. I mean, there's just so many talented offensive players, and it starts in the wide receiver room. And whether Chris Godwin returns in week 1 or not, you're going to see the offense pick up where they left off last year. And the addition of Godwin's only going to make an elite offense even better.
That's right. This team is too good to fail. They just have too much talent all across everywhere. So looking forward to covering the team this week or this season. It's been a really, really fun week talking all about your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We have one more show coming up tomorrow. That is for Pewter Platinum and Premier members, the Pewter Insider. We'll talk about, can the Bucs get the number 1 seed in the NFC? be a tall task. They haven't done it before, but man, would a first round bye be mighty nice for this Buccaneers team as they try to capture their third Super Bowl in franchise history. We will talk about that tomorrow at 1:30 on the Pewter Insider. In the meantime, if you're not already doing so, please make sure you're following us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report. And our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment on this video as well. Maybe it's a prediction of when you think Chris Godwin will be back or who's going to step up the most in his absence until he gets back to playing for the Bucs offense. That's going to do it for us on this show. For Adam Slavon, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching. Have a fantastic weekend if we don't see you on Friday's show. And we will see you soon for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.
Oh.